Hi, I'm Richard. I'm a speech and language therapist and a lecturer based in the UK. In this video, I will explain the speech and language therapy science behind why Pokemon's portrayal of someone with speech difficulties is wrong. Nintendo released Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green in February 2026 on the Nintendo Switch and Switch 2 consoles. They did this to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Pokemon franchise. Leaf Green and Fire Red are enhanced versions or remakes of the original Pokemon Blue and Red, which were released on the Game Boy. Up until now, they've not been available on any of Nintendo's consoles. I recently bought Leaf Green for my Switch 2 when it came out. When replaying the game, one thing stood out to me as a speech and language therapist, which I paid little attention to as a child. When the player reaches Fuchsia City in southwest Kanto, famous for its poison-type gym and the Safari Zone, you meet Safari Zone Warden and learn from others that he has recently lost his set of gold teeth and cannot speak clearly as a result. When you interact with the Warden, his dialogue is impossible to understand, and the game forces you to recover his teeth from the Safari Zone in order to progress with the game. When you return his teeth, the Warden thanks the player, explains that no one could understand a word he said, briefly discusses the negative impact this had upon him and his interactions in the workplace, and then gives the player the move HM04 Strength as a reward. The International Phonetic Association produces a phonetic alphabet and a chart to describe which speech sounds humans can physically produce and how we can transcribe or write these sounds down. Here we can see that teeth are involved in producing two different types of speech sounds, labiodental and dental. In the English language, there are only two labiodental consonant speech sounds, a f and a v, where the bottom lip makes contact with the upper front teeth, and air is forced through the narrow gap between them. There are also only two consonant dental sounds, a th and a v, where the tongue tip is placed between or against the back of the front teeth. Air is then forced out of the mouth through the small gap around the tongue. Now, these are speech sounds that are produced directly using the teeth, but other speech sounds that require narrow channel for air would also negatively be affected. So someone without teeth like the Warden would sound more mumbled or slurred due to the uncontrolled airflow leaving their mouth compared to the normal speech. This type of speech issue is called an organic speech sound disorder, which means there is an identified physical cause, specifically an acquired structural one due to the misindentation or teeth. In the Warden's case, the fix is relatively simple, but I've worked with lots of patients in hospitals who've lost their teeth following trauma such as a car accident or a fight, and they needed dental reconstruction in the community once they were discharged. Pokemon's portrayal of the Warden's speech difficulties is inaccurate in two ways. First, how severely his speech was impaired. When you look at the IPA chart, you realise most English speech sounds are produced in other places in the mouth and throat, not directly with the teeth. The Warden's speech would likely be worse without his dentures, but he would not be completely unintelligible to listeners as he is portrayed in the game, as most consonant speech sounds and all of his vowel sounds would still be available. Because it's a structural issue with no brain injury involved, he could also use a range of augmentative and alternative communication strategies, like using his body language, using gestures or writing, etc., to get his message across, even if his speech was slightly less intelligible and he wasn't being understood. The second inaccuracy is the speech sounds he produces without his dentures. When you look at the words produced, even just the first sentence when interacting with the player, he says hif, fuff, hefferfu. That labiodental f sound is used consistently throughout his dialogue to suggest he has speech difficulties. Ironically, it is one of the few speech sounds that would be much harder to articulate accurately without his teeth. From a speech and language therapy science point of view, Pokemon's portrayal of speech difficulties are inaccurate. They present more of a caricature than what real speech difficulties look like or how easily they can be fixed most often. But what was nice to see was a somewhat accurate portrayal of the negative psychosocial impact of the Warden's speech difficulties upon himself. He was too ashamed to show his face to the office and hides himself away. This does reflect how some people feel when they have speech difficulties, and something that speech and language therapists see regularly in clinical practice when working with either children or adults. So there you have it, the speech and language therapy science behind why Pokemon's portrayal of someone with a speech difficulty is wrong. If you found this video useful, consider liking it and subscribing to the channel. maybe go watch my video on why reading Paddington Bear books helps to develop the brains of babies born prematurely. Otherwise, thanks for watching and take care.